Before painting the wings, I'll quickly go over what I did for the armor. As you can see, the base coats have already been laid down. Diluting Cavalry Brown 3:1 with water, I created a wash with which I'll add some simple but effective rust effect on the armor. I applied it over all of the silver detail as best as I could, but if any ended up spilling over the gold, it won't be much of a problem. The rust effect has no particular reason but that I have already done it on my 2 other models from this box, so while I changed the wing color, I tried to keep everything else similar. This wash, alongside an overall one using dark rust, diluted in the same way, will create not the more common orangey color we relate to rust, but it will tint the overall look of the metal to accommodate such a color without it feeling out of place. Generally, when applying such recessed shades, we would go from dark to light. However, as the metallic base tone is more glossy than regular paints, I always start with my intermediate tone, so that it pulls more on the recesses, while at the same time, once it dries, it reduces how much the brown wash will slide away from the flatter areas. This way, giving me an overall brownish filter over all of the armor, and a more concentrated reddish color on the recesses. Only thing left to do, as you might imagine, is to add some spots of orange here and there. Remember that less is more, so be careful not to add too much, unless of course you want to go with a heavily rusted surface, where you could even move on to some yellowish tones afterwards. Finally, everything gets polished and tied down with a dry brush of silver. Yes, even over the gold, which as you'll see won't stop reading as gold even though it has the same highlight color as the armor. Apart from some gripplies, that is pretty much all of the model other than the wings. So let's move into what you came here for. First step to paint the fire will be to lay down a white undertone, so that the transparent colors can shine through with all of their value. Here I am mixing an all wash of white, which I want to run through the recess to also allow for some bright tones in between the feathers. The low surface tension of the oils will make it easy to just keep the wash exclusive to the recesses, for an easy and effective paint wash, though the same effect can also be achieved using acrylics and water. In the description, a previous episode dedicated to this technique will also be linked. With that done, I took out my airbrush, and apart from giving the rest of the fiery wings a proper white base coat, I also plastered some paint over the gold details in the wings, to lay the ground for some glow later on. With the white undertone ready, I continued by spraying fluorescent yellow through the airbrush. This will lay a better ground for the upcoming colors, as you'll see once I move into fluorescent orange. But for now, I want to cover everything up with a pair of semi-transparent layers. While any yellow could be used for this same step, I recently got my hands on some fluorescent paints which I want to try out, in the hopes of achieving more striking OSL effects in the future. Moving into the orange, I can now tint the yellow into orange to different degrees, which you'll see as the layers build up over everything but the ridges and recesses I am intentionally missing by angling my airbrush not completely perpendicular to the wings, tinting those recesses into a brighter yet not so intense orange, creating the first stages of color transition. I have once again diluted this paint with equal amounts of water in order to build the color slowly. I am in no rush to finish, and I want to take my time and make sure I can achieve different tonalities, which this wing allows me to due to its size, unlike more common fire sources such as torches which are too small. Following this same idea of abusing the angle by which I spray the paint, I'll use red ink and spray it from below the wings to catch only the ends and the underside of the flames. On some areas where I might run the risk of overspraying the model, I'm using my hand as best as I can to mask it, but either way, anything that escapes will end up reading as OSL. In order to enhance the inner and hottest part of the flames, I reapplied a bit of fluorescent yellow where the bottom of the wings and the fire met. In these sort of cases, it is common to first lay down some white, especially if the color has poor coverage. However, I found that the fluorescent yellow, while transparent, hit that perfect opacity to where it would blend around the edges while still providing that pinch of intensity that makes a difference. ' Finally, another way to increase contrast is through adding dark tones. I decided to dry brush some dark red over the metallics to give them a heated up look, which at the same time, by being darker, will make the lighter colors stand out more. Only thing to be wary of is not to catch the flames, something I didn't do the best job of simply by not taking my time. And here is how the model ended up looking. If the idea of using an airbrush sounds unappealing to you, you can find more than one video linked in the description where I teach you how to paint fire by brush. For now, I hope you found the video useful and that I'll see you for the next one.